All right, let's jump right in, shall we? We're taking a deep dive today into the heart of German politics.
The AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland.
Exactly, and we're not just skimming the surface.
No.
You are amazing listeners. You sent us their Leitentrag.
Their election manifesto, their game plan.
Yeah, it's like a political x-ray.
Yeah.
We're going to use it to see right through to the core of what they want for Germany in 2025.
This document is absolutely crucial. I mean, it's more than just campaign promises, you know?
It's their playbook.
Exactly. It's them putting their cards on the table.
If they win.
This is how they'll reshape the country.
What strikes me right off the bat is their starting point.
Oh, yeah.
They paint a very, well, let's just say they don't sugarcoat the current state of Germany.
No, not at all. They tap into a sentiment that's been brewing for a while.
A sense of things going wrong.
Yeah, like the traditional German way of life is under threat.
From economic pressures, social change, the whole 9 yards.
And they offer a solution.
Hit the reset button.
Yeah, and their vision for the economy is a huge part of that.
They keep talking about a competitive, innovation-driven economy.
Right.
But doesn't every party say that?
Sure, on the surface. But like with everything, the devil is in the details.
So what's the AfD's secret sauce?
They basically want a leaner, more focused Germany.
What do you mean?
One that really prioritizes its own workforce and doesn't incentivize people to not work.
They're not big fans of the welfare system, then.
But particularly the Bürgergeld, they think it actually discourages people from working.
Really?
Yeah, they claim a family with 2 kids could get around 3,000 euros a month from the system.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
It is, and their point is that it makes working seem financially unattractive.
Bold statement.
Very. And this feeds directly into their idea for something they call activating basic security.
Okay, break down for us. What's that all about?
Imagine a safety net, but instead of just catching you, it bounces you back up.
Okay, I like the analogy.
It's about encouraging self-reliance. You know, not just getting comfortable relying on the state.
So it's not about handouts, it's about a hand up.
Exactly. Although, whether that's actually achievable in practice, that's a whole other debate.
Yeah, I can see that getting complicated, but it definitely feels like they're speaking to a specific audience.
For sure. Those who feel like the system isn't working for them, the ones left behind.
And speaking of targeting, let's talk family policy. They're pretty upfront about their stance.
Very much so. Traditional values are front and center.
They're pushing back against anything they see as eroding the traditional family.
Exactly. They point the finger at leftist ideologies for undermining those values.
Like they're trying to turn back the clock.
Yeah, a return to what they see as the natural order.
And then we get to the really controversial stuff, energy and climate policy.
Oh, yeah.
They outright reject human-caused climate change.
That's a pretty radical stance these days.
It is. Most parties are all about green initiatives.
Right, but the AfD frames this as a matter of economic common sense.
And energy security.
They think Germany's shooting itself in the foot with all these green policies.
Driving up costs, hurting businesses, that sort of thing.
Exactly. They want to ditch the whole Green Deal, go back to relying on fossil fuels.
Big departure from the direction things are going.
For sure. And they see the Green Deal as part of a bigger globalist agenda they call the Great Transformation.
They even connect it to this idea of a climate catastrophe narrative, which they think is being used to justify policies that are hurting German industry and individual freedom.
Right. It's like they're positioning themselves as the voice of reason.
Standing up for German industry.
The champions of common sense against this globalist tide.
And it all feeds into their narrative that traditional German values are under attack.
Exactly. And it resonates with people who feel like the world is changing too fast.
Like they're losing control.
And that leads us to, well, probably their most talked about issue.
Migration.
They want a complete overhaul of how Germany handles it.
Like build a wall and be done with it.
Well, maybe not literally, but yeah, think of it as building a fortress around Germany.
Stricter borders, fewer asylum seekers.
Even pulling out of the EU's common asylum system.
Wow, that's a big move. What's the reasoning there?
Their argument is that integration has failed.
Failed how?
They say it's led to parallel societies within Germany, like people aren't assimilating.
And so their answer is to just shut the door.
More or less.
Yeah.
They even call for closing those big migrant shelters in neighborhoods with high non-EU populations.
Really?
Yeah, and they tie it back to this idea of light culture.
That dominant German culture everyone should conform to.
Exactly. If you want to be here, you have to become one of us.
It's a very specific vision of what it means to be German.
Absolutely. And it's controversial. Some see it as exclusionary, even discriminatory.
But for the AfD, it's non-negotiable.
It's a core part of their identity.
Interesting. And then there's their views on digitalization and technology, which are a little less talked about,
Yeah, they seem almost wary of it.
like it's a double-edged sword.
Right. They see the importance of digitalization, but they're worried about its potential for social control.
Data privacy, individual freedom, that kind of thing.
Exactly. They specifically call out things like social scoring and digital identity.
Even comparing them to the Chinese social credit system.
And they are adamantly against a digital euro,
They see it as a tool for surveillance.
a way for the government to track everything you do.
So they're pro-technology, but anti-control.
It's a tricky balance.
Definitely. All right, let's wrap this first part up by getting to the bedrock of their platform.
Culture and identity.
This is where they really hammer home their vision for preserving a very specific idea of Germany.
It's more than just preservation, though.
What do you mean?
It's a call for a cultural counter-revolution.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued.
They argue that Germany's current focus on its historical low points has created this sense of national shame,
Interesting.
and they want a more balanced view of history.
One that celebrates German achievements as well.
Exactly. They want Germans to be proud of their heritage again.
And they even criticize decolonization efforts.
Yeah, they see it as an attack on German identity.
Like it's erasing their history and culture.
And this ties into their broader opposition to multiculturalism.
They believe Germany needs to reassert its own unique identity.
A strong national culture is the foundation of a strong society.
That's the message they're sending.
Loud and clear.
Yeah.
And this whole idea of a cultural counter-revolution that really gets to the heart of why they're gaining traction.
They're offering a return to a simpler time, a more familiar Germany.
Exactly, appealing to that nostalgia.
But is that even realistic these days? Germany's a globalized nation, a key player in the EU.
Right.
How does the AfD square that reality with this vision of a more inward-looking Germany?
It's a good question. A tricky balance.
Yeah.
They acknowledge the economic benefits of globalization. They're not completely blind to it, but they say it's come at a cost, a big one.
What cost?
The erosion of German culture and sovereignty. That's their argument.
So their solution is?
A more assertive, you could even say confrontational, approach to international relations.
So less playing nice and more Germany first.
Exactly, a big shift from how Germany's done things for decades.
So what would that look like in practice?
Well, they've talked about withdrawing from certain international agreements.
Like what?
The EU's common asylum system, for example.
Okay.
They also think Germany gives too much to international organizations in development aid.
They want to cut back.
Yeah, focus on Germany's own interests first.
That's not going to make them popular in Brussels.
Probably not. But they think Germany's strong enough to go it alone.
Economically and politically.
They point to their industrial base, their central role in the European economy.
It's a gamble.
Definitely. But it might appeal to voters who feel like Germany's been taken advantage of on the world stage.
Interesting. So we've talked about their foreign policy, but they don't stop there, do they?
No. Their platform is really comprehensive.
Like a blueprint for a whole new Germany.
They have opinions on almost every aspect of German life.
Give us some examples.
Well, education is a big one.
What's their take on that?
They think the current system is failing to instill, a strong sense of German identity.
And traditional values.
Yeah, they even criticize what they see as an undermining of the Leistungsprinzip.
That's the principle of achievement, right?
Yeah, exactly. They say education's become too focused on inclusivity, and it's come at the expense of excellence.
Sounds like they want to return to a more traditional, rigorous approach.
Very much so. Back to basics. Discipline, rigor, national pride.
What does that look like in practice?
They want a curriculum that focuses on German history, literature, culture, that kind of thing.
Less global, more German?
And they're very critical of what they see is the influence of leftist ideologies in schools and universities.
So it's not just about academics, it's about shaping minds.
It's about creating good, patriotic German citizens.
But doesn't that risk stifling critical thinking?
It's a valid concern. Their critics say it's too narrow a view of education.
Not preparing students for the real world.
But the AfD sees it as a necessary correction.
A way to counter what they see as cultural relativism.
And a loss of national identity.
Fascinating. And what about the media? They have some pretty strong opinions there, too.
Oh, yeah, they're very distrustful of what they call the mainstream media.
Why is that?
They think it's biased against them, hostile to their values.
Part of the establishment they're trying to fight against.
Exactly. They accuse the media of pushing a liberal agenda, ignoring conservative voices.
And downplaying the challenges Germany is facing.
They're particularly critical of the öffentlich-rechtliche Medien.
The public broadcasting system?
Yeah, they see it as a mouthpiece for the government, the elite.
And they're not just complaining, they actually want to change things.
Oh yeah, they have concrete proposals.
Like what?
More transparency in media funding, less influence from political parties,
Okay.
more diversity of viewpoints, even a new media watchdog to ensure fairness and balance.
It's a pretty radical shakeup of the media landscape.
It is, and it's controversial.
Some would say it's an attack on freedom of the press.
Yeah, that it's about silencing dissenting voices, promoting their own agenda,
But the AfD says it's about leveling the playing field.
making the media more representative of German society.
It's a debate with big implications for democracy.
Absolutely. Freedom of the press is a cornerstone.
And speaking of democracy, the AfD wants to reform the political system itself, right?
Yeah, they think it's too bureaucratic, too centralized, too out of touch.
So what's their solution?
More power to the people, more direct democracy.
What does that look like?
Citizen initiatives, referendums, even reducing the number of MPs.
So less power for politicians, more for the people.
That's the idea, a very populist message.
But wouldn't that destabilize the government?
It's a risk. Their critics say it would lead to chaos, gridlock,
But the AfD thinks it's necessary.
to make the system more responsive to the people.
It's definitely a bold vision.
Very bold, and it appeals to those who feel ignored by the establishment.
The ones who feel like their voices aren't being heard.
Exactly.
It's a powerful message, but it could also be dangerous.
It could empower extremist views. That's a real concern.
And then there's the issue of crime and security.
Oh, yeah, they're very tough on that.
What's their stance?
They say Germany's become too soft on criminals, too tolerant of lawlessness.
They think the country's not safe anymore.
And they blame it on, well, you can probably guess.
Immigration?
They say Germany's lost control of its borders, that it's putting its own citizens at risk.
They're tapping into some very real fears.
Absolutely. Fears about security, about national identity.
It's a powerful narrative, but it's also very divisive.
It plays on those anxieties about the other,
It's like they're saying Germany's under threat from within and without.
and that only they can save it.
It's a message that resonates with a certain segment of the population,
The ones who feel like they've been left behind, forgotten.
the ones who are looking for someone to blame.
It's a dangerous game they're playing.
It is. Their rhetoric is effective, but it also risks tearing German society apart.
They've managed to tap into this anger, this resentment, but in doing so, they've made the divisions even worse.
It's a very complex situation, and their platform doesn't offer easy answers.
No, it raises more questions than it answers.
But that's what makes it so fascinating.
It forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about our own societies.
About the challenges we face, the choices we make.
The AfD is like this mirror, reflecting back at us our own fears and aspirations.
It's a challenge to think critically about who we are and where we're going.
Yeah.
It's like they're saying, look, this is what happens when you abandon tradition.
Exactly. And that message, it really resonates with a lot of people.
The ones who feel like they've lost something.
Yeah, a sense of stability, of belonging.
But what I find really interesting is how they connect this whole cultural narrative to their economic proposals.
Oh, absolutely. It's all tied together.
They don't just complain about the loss of values. They say it's directly impacting Germany's economic performance,
Right. They argue the current system, it's stifling innovation.
holding back entrepreneurs.
Yeah, burying businesses under mountains of regulations and taxes.
They even talk about this parallel economy operating under the radar,
Almost like a shadow Germany.
driven by people trying to escape all those burdens.
Exactly. And it's a powerful image
It really drives home their point.
that the system is rigged against the average German worker.
Like the government's more interested in bureaucracy than helping its own people.
And their solution is pretty radical.
Tell me more.
They want a complete overhaul, a simplification of the tax code, deregulation across the board,
Okay, less red tape, lower taxes. I can see the appeal.
and a renewed focus on attracting skilled labor.
It's all about making Germany more competitive, more dynamic.
Exactly, creating opportunities for German workers.
But how does this all square with their skepticism of globalization?
That's the tricky part.
Because globalization has brought a lot of benefits to Germany.
No doubt, they acknowledge that. They're not completely against global trade, but they say it needs to be managed carefully, with German interests always coming first.
So they're not isolationists, but they're definitely protectionists.
Yeah, they're critical of free trade agreements that they think put German businesses at a disadvantage.
And they even suggest using tariffs to protect German industries,
It's a delicate balancing act.
wanting the benefits of global trade, but also wanting to control it.
And it's not just about economics, it's about culture too.
How so?
They see a strong economy as essential for a strong culture.
Like economic insecurity makes people vulnerable to outside influences.
Exactly. They want Germany to be self-sufficient, both economically and culturally.
A nation that's confident and fiercely protective of its identity.
That's the vision they're selling.
And it's both appealing and concerning at the same time.
Yeah, it speaks to that desire for security, for stability, for a sense of belonging.
But it also risks excluding anyone who doesn't fit into their very specific definition of what it means to be German.
That's the big question, isn't it?
Who gets to decide what it means to be German?
And what happens to those who don't fit the mold?
It's a question that goes beyond just the AfD.
It's a question facing societies all over the world.
So where does this leave us? We've spent this deep dive really digging into the AfD's platform.
Exploring its nuances, its contradictions.
Trying to understand the appeal, the potential consequences.
And the big question now is, what does it all mean for Germany?
What happens next?
Well, that's ultimately up to the German people.
They'll decide at the ballot box whether this vision for Germany resonates with them.
The AfD has definitely tapped into something, a feeling of discontent, a desire for change.
A fear of the future.
Whether they can turn that into electoral success, that remains to be seen.
But one thing's for sure, they're a force to be reckoned with.
Their ideas are shaping the debate, challenging the status quo.
And forcing us all to ask some hard questions about who we are and what we want for our societies. So that's it for our deep dive into the AfD's platform, but the conversation doesn't end here.
You've heard their vision, now it's up to you to analyze it.
Weigh the potential benefits and drawbacks.
And decide for yourselves how it aligns with your own values and your own vision for Germany's future.
Politics is about more than just policies.
It's about identity, belonging, the stories we tell ourselves about who we are.
The AfD's platform is a powerful reminder of that.
It's a challenge to all of us to think critically about the kind of world we want to live in.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and keep those conversations going.